1848. It was called the Springtime of Peoples, which is a beautifully poetic way of saying an entire continent simultaneously had a nervous breakdown. After decades of stuffy, powdered wig diplomacy orchestrated by guys like Austria's Clemens von Metternich, who believed the ideal society was one where nothing ever happened, Europe was a powder keg. You had liberals who'd read a book and decided they wanted a parliament. You had nationalists who discovered they had a unique cultural identity and decided that meant they needed their own country, preferably with their neighbor's territory included. And you had a whole lot of hungry, overworked poor people who just wanted bread. For one glorious, chaotic spring, it looked like they might all get what they wanted. It was a beautiful dream, right before it turned into a multi-car pileup of idealism and bayonets. As always, the party started in Paris. The French had decided they were bored of their citizen king, Louis Philippe, a man who represented the interests of the rich so perfectly he might as well have been a walking bank vault. In February, after the government banned a political banquet because nothing says stable regime like being terrified of public dinners, the city exploded. The king promptly abdicated and fled to England, famously complaining that he was the last king of France. He wasn't, but you have to admire the dramatic flair. Suddenly, France had its second republic. Everyone was ecstatic. Liberals, socialists, poets, everyone joined hands. They created national workshops to guarantee employment, a move that made the property-owning liberals, who had just wanted voting rights for themselves, start to wonder if they'd made a terrible mistake. The unity lasted for about 5 minutes. News from Paris spread faster than gossip. In the scattered German states, people got inspired. Barricades went up in Berlin. The Prussian king, Frederick William IV, a romantic medievalist who was pathologically allergic to the 19th century, was so shaken he rode through the city wearing the revolutionary black, red, and gold colors, promising a constitution. It was a masterclass in panic-based governance. Meanwhile, in Frankfurt, Germany's best and brightest, mostly professors, lawyers, and other people who had never built anything more complicated than a sentence, gathered for the Frankfurt Parliament. Their goal? To write a constitution for a unified German nation. It was a noble, historic, incredibly nerdy endeavor. They debated fundamental rights for months, while the actual monarchs, who had the actual armies, were patiently waiting for everyone to get tired of talking. If Germany was a complicated puzzle, the Austrian Empire was a plate of spaghetti dropped on the floor. It was a multi-ethnic empire held together by duct tape and dynastic inertia. When Vienna rose up in March, the whole thing came unglued. The Hungarians, led by the fiery orator Lajos Kossuth, demanded virtual independence. The Czechs in Bohemia wanted their own thing. The Italians and Lombardy and Venetia decided it was a great time to kick the Austrians out. The architect of the old system, Metternich, had to escape Vienna hidden in a laundry cart, which is about as dignified an exit as you can imagine for a man who ran Europe for 30 years. The Emperor Ferdinand I, whose official nickname was the Good, but was privately known as the Simpleton, basically just agreed to everything everyone asked for. For a moment, it seemed like the Habsburgs were finished. But the empire had a secret weapon. Its minorities all hated each other even more than they hated the Austrians. The fundamental problem of 1848 was that the revolutionaries were a coalition of the incompatible. They all agreed that the old kings had to go. They agreed on absolutely nothing after that. The middle-class liberals wanted free trade, property rights, and a government they could control. They were horrified by the socialists' talk of redistributing wealth. The urban workers, who provided the muscle for the barricades, wanted job security and the right to not starve. They found the liberals' obsession with constitutional clauses a bit abstract when they couldn't afford bread. And the nationalists? They were playing an entirely different game. A German nationalist and a Czech nationalist both wanted freedom, but they couldn't agree on what to do with Prague. A Hungarian nationalist and a Croatian nationalist were practically destined for a cage match. The old order didn't have to divide and conquer. The revolutionaries did it for them, free of charge. Let's zoom in on the nationalist dream, because it's a perfect example of the whole mess. The Hungarians put up the most successful fight of 1848, declaring independence and creating their own army. Lajos Kossuth was a hero, a freedom fighter. Except, about half the population of the Kingdom of Hungary wasn't ethnically Hungarian. There were Slovaks, Croats, Serbs, Romanians, and Germans. When they asked for their own language rights and autonomy, the new liberal Hungarian government told them to get lost and learn Hungarian. The Croats, under their leader Josip Jellai, decided they preferred the devil they knew. They allied with the Habsburgs to fight the Hungarians. Vienna couldn't believe its luck. The very force that was tearing the empire, nationalism, was now the key to putting it back together. They just armed the Croats and Serbs and pointed them at Budapest. It was genius in the most cynical way possible. While the professors debated and the nationalists squabbled, the forces of reaction were getting their act together. The key was the army. In most places, the armies remained loyal to their kings, not to some vague concept of the nation. In Prague, General Windisch-Gertz, a man who famously said humans only begin at the rank of baron, used a minor scuffle as an excuse to bombard the city into submission. In Italy, the 81-year-old Marshal Radetzky, who had fought against Napoleon, crushed the Italian nationalists at the Battle of Custoza. Age and treachery, it turns out, really do beat youth and skill. These guys weren't interested in debate. They had cannons. The revolutionaries had pamphlets and righteous indignation. It was not an even fight. The springtime of peoples was rapidly turning into the autumn of absolutely crushing military defeats. Back in France, the lab where all political experiments are tried first, the Liberal Socialist Alliance had officially died. When the conservative-dominated government closed the national workshops, the workers of Paris rose up in what became known as the June Days Uprising. It was a brutal, desperate class war fought in the streets. The new Republican government, led by General Cavaignac, showed zero hesitation. They brought in the army and slaughtered an estimated 1,500 workers and arrested over 12,000. So much for fraternity. With the radicals crushed, France held a presidential election. And who did they vote for? Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, Napoleon's nephew. His main qualification was his last name. He promised order, stability, and national glory. A few years later, in 1851, he dissolved the Republic and declared himself Emperor Napoleon III. France had speed-run the entire cycle from monarchy to republic to empire in under 4 years. An impressive new record. And what of our dear professors in Frankfurt? After a year of diligent, high-minded work, they produced the Frankfurt Constitution, a masterpiece of liberal thought. It had a Bill of Rights, a democratic parliament, the works. They just needed a monarch to agree to be, a constitutional monarch. They decided to offer the shiny new crown of a unified Germany to King Frederick William IV of Prussia, the most powerful German ruler. He took one look at this offer, made by elected representatives of the people, and turned it down flat. He famously declared he would not accept a crown from the gutter, a dog collar that would make him a serf of the revolution. This was the ultimate snub. The entire project, a year of work by hundreds of intelligent men, collapsed on the spot. The delegates just packed up their bags and went home. The German Revolution died not with a bang, but with a profoundly aristocratic insult. By the summer of 1849, the party was well and truly over. In Italy, the Roman Republic, briefly led by Mazzini and Garibaldi, was crushed by French troops sent by the new Republican president, Louis Napoleon, ironically. In Hungary, the revolution was only put down when the Austrian emperor swallowed his pride and begged Tsar Nicholas I of Russia to invade. The Tsar, who considered himself the policeman of conservatism, happily sent 100,000 troops. The Hungarians didn't stand a chance. Everywhere, the aftermath was brutal. Executions, imprisonments, and a wave of emigration to America, including many of Germany's 48ers. The monarchs were back, and they were in a foul mood. It seemed like an absolute catastrophic failure. All that hope, all that struggle had led right back to absolutism, only this time with more secret police. So, was it all pointless? A complete waste of time? Well, no. History is rarely that neat. 1848 was a failure, but it was a spectacularly educational failure. For one thing, the final vestiges of feudalism and serfdom, which the revolutionaries had abolished in Austria and Germany, were never brought back. Even the most reactionary monarch realized you can't really unfree the peasants. The monarchs also learned that they couldn't just ignore their people forever. They started granting constitutions, even if they were toothless, and dabbling in social reform to keep the masses quiet. The revolutionaries themselves learned some hard lessons. The liberals learned that you need more than good ideas. You might need an army. The socialists learned that the liberals would sell them out in a heartbeat. And the nationalists? Their dreams had been crushed, but the ideas of a unified Italy and a unified Germany were now out in the open. The dress rehearsal was over. The main performance would be orchestrated not by poets, but by stone-cold pragmatists like Bismarck and Cavour. The revolutions of 1848 are the story of what happens when everyone shows up to the party with a different idea of what music should be played. It was a glorious, naive, and ultimately doomed attempt to remake a continent in a single season. It exposed the fatal cracks in the Revolutionary Alliance, demonstrating that freedom is a dangerously ambiguous word. Is it freedom to vote, freedom from starvation, or freedom from foreign rule? It turns out you have to pick. 1848 failed to create a democratic Europe, but it created the modern political playbook. Class conflict, nationalism, the battle between liberalism and socialism, all the big arguments of the next century were laid bare. It was the moment Europe's optimistic teenage years ended and its cynical, complicated adulthood began. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!